Didn't see it coming. That's the exact quote that we're hearing from John Fetterman. There are other folks who spent time with him yesterday, who spoke about it afterwards, who many said he deserves a full hearing. Should they have seen it coming? Should they have been notified? What do you make of what we're watching unfold in just the last 40 or 50 minutes or so?
Well, it's hard to say, Chris, because I don't think anybody saw it coming just yet. It may have come later on. But the big question is, no one knows what's coming out of Trump world these days. You can't see things coming. Gates's nomination, people didn't see coming. The withdrawal, you don't see coming. I think it has something to do with the House report. But at the same time, you know, there are things that have been going on with this nomination. He is, you know, Matt Gaetz to say he doesn't want to be a distraction is just almost like the spotlights saying, I don't want to be bright. He revels in distraction and really just the kind of distancing that he puts between himself and reality is just amazing. So I don't think people saw it coming, but at the same time, I'm hoping that this may be a sign that U.S. senators are telling President-elect Trump that there is still a U.S. Senate to be dealt with. We have our institution, we respect it, and you should respect it as well. We will see whether that's the case or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what do you imagine was going on behind the scenes? Because I thought one of the most interesting things, Senator, was you did not have a bunch of Republicans coming out, Republican senators now, coming out and saying, this is a bad decision, I'm going to vote against it. They were very measured in their comments on this. Is this in some way them trying to differentiate themselves from the House? We're going to play by the rules. We're going to let this system, let it all play out. And this is how it played out. But maybe there were some calls made to appropriate people at Mar-a-Lago saying it ain't happening.
Yeah, that's what I think you have to assume has happened right now. And that's in a good way you assume that that's happened. Because here's the public stance that this has been. While those senators were kind of, as we say in the South, keeping their powder dry, you had other senators like Tommy Tuberville threatening his fellow senators, saying, if you don't vote for these nominees, we're coming after you. You had unnamed sources from Trump world saying Elon Musk is going to finance primary opponents. We will use recess appointments. We will blow up the U.S. Senate. So you got to hope that there were enough U.S. senators behind the scenes saying, do not push us. We can work with you. We want to work with you, but do not push us and blow up the United States Senate in this Republican majority that you have. Let's deal with this and let's put some people in there that have at least a modicum of experience and qualifications and, importantly, character.
All right, I want to read what we just got a couple of minutes ago. This is a statement on social media from Donald Trump. He writes, I greatly appreciate the recent efforts of Matt Gaetz in seeking approval to be Attorney General. He was doing very well, but at the same time did not want to be a distraction for the administration, for which he has much respect. Matt has a wonderful future, and I look forward to watching all of the great things he will do. There are so many things in that statement I have questions about. But, Ken, let me ask you, there was a lot of concern among Justice Department officials when this was announced. Have we gotten any reaction from there?
I'm getting private reaction, Chris, great expressions of relief from current and former DOJ officials. Look, there were so many problems from their point of view with this nomination. First of all, the fact that the Justice Department had investigated Matt Gaetz criminally. So there are actually prosecutors working over there at DOJ that created a file of evidence in a criminal investigation of the man who might have been their future boss. And there are people who work on sex trafficking investigations, for example, who are very concerned about the idea of Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. But then you leave that aside and you look at the fact that he hadn't really practiced law for very long, that he has no experience running a large organization, and that the Attorney General is not just the chief legal officer of the United States, but a very important national security post with access to very significant intelligence. So, look, people are very relieved, but the big question now on the table is what kind of nominee comes next? Because what's very important, and I want people to understand this, is that Donald Trump has elevated his defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, to be the Deputy Attorney General. That's a really significant appointment. That's the chief operating officer of the Justice Department. And Todd Blanche worked at the Justice Department. He's a real lawyer. He understands that the wild charges that people like Matt Gaetz have been making about the Justice Department being corrupt and the FBI being politicized, that fundamentally is not true. He may have his criticisms of how these investigations were handled, but he understands that the Justice Department upholds the rule of law, that career officials work over there for both Republicans and Democrats. The question now is, what kind of nominee will we see next to be his boss? Will we see another conspiracy theorist, somebody who says that the place needs to be blown up, that people need to be sent to jail? Or will we see a person like a Todd Blanche, someone with experience, who may be Republican and may want to change priorities, but who fundamentally believes in the Justice Department? And Chris, that's a big question for not only the Justice Department, but for the future of the rule of law over the next 4 years.
I want to bring in NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, who is in West Palm Beach. And Vaughn, just yesterday, as you know, Gaetz was asked about his prospects as he was going around on the Hill and meeting with senators. I want to play what he said.
How have your meetings been today, sir?
Well, can we ask what your message is?
They've been going great. Senator's been giving me a lot of good advice. I'm looking forward to a hearing. Folks have been very supportive.
Are you confident you can get confirmed by the Senate? Do you feel like...
It was a great day.
Okay, so it was a great day. He's looking forward to the hearing. And then today, the statement from Donald Trump, from where you are, Vaughn, saying he was doing very well. How did we get from he was doing very well, great, looking forward to the hearing, to withdrawing his name from consideration? Do we know?
We do have new reporting from our colleague, Sarah Fitzpatrick, who is reporting that we have information that the 17-year-old who Matt Gaetz is alleged to have had sex with at a party had 2 different encounters, sexual encounters with him at that party. That's development here within just the last minutes, as potentially just another piece of evidence or detail that may have compelled Matt Gaetz to ultimately step aside after these 8 days of scrutiny. This is, from Matt Gaetz, I think, obviously not exactly how he wanted this process to play out, but even more so for Donald Trump and this transition team. What these Republican senators have indicated to the Trump transition team is that they intend to play that advise and consent role. We've known from Donald Trump for years now that if he were to have won this 2024 election, that he intended to surround himself by loyalists who he was convinced were going to go into these departments and agencies, including the DOJ, and act at his own will and his own discretion. And that is what led to Matt Gaetz' selection to be the nominee for the Department of Justice. But what we now are seeing up on Capitol Hill was clearly Republican senators from Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, you could say Todd Young, Bill Cassidy. It only takes 4 Republican senators to block the confirmation of any of these nominees. And it was going to be an outstanding question of whether the Republican Party up on Capitol Hill, which Donald Trump has effectively reshaped greater into his image over the course of these last 8 years, whether it would still stand as a barrier to essentially ultimate unilateral executive authority and declaration over governance in Washington, D.C. And this is the first pin to drop in which it's clearly indicated that he's not ultimately going to get his way every single time. And even with the threats of recess appointments, there was a clear calculation, which we will be reporting out, as to why they decided for Matt Gaetz to ultimately step aside. Because I think this is a big indication that the Republican senators up on Capitol Hill are not a sure bet to sign off on everything that Donald Trump sends their way.
So is it your sense that this had been building? Now we have this new reporting. I mean, did you get any sense on the ground there that the conversations had grown to include maybe he's not going to make it?
No, to answer your question, Chris, I think that there was a sense of keen confidence here in Mar-a-Lago that this was Donald Trump's Republican Party, and that, well, as Matt Gaetz was as much of a surprise to so many in Donald Trump's inner orbit when he made the selection 8 days ago, that it was the likes of Stephen Miller, who was on air, the incoming deputy chief of staff, who said that they would be willing to press through recess appointments in order to ensure that Donald Trump's selections are ultimately confirmed. And so this is, I think, surprising because we haven't seen over the years Matt Gaetz ever really step aside or skirt the attention that has stemmed from the DOJ investigation and House Ethics Committee investigation. He's had plenty of opportunities to step aside from the limelight, but Matt Gaetz has never taken that opportunity. And I think it only also intensifies frustrations over Republicans coming just short in several key Senate races, from Wisconsin to Michigan to Arizona, because if they were able to have pulled off those key Senate races, I don't think that we'd be having this conversation right now over whether Matt Gaetz was going to be confirmed or not.
So, Eddie, I just want to reiterate what this new reporting is. This comes from a source familiar. The House Ethics Committee was told that the 17-year-old had 2 separate sexual encounters with Gaetz at the same party in 2017, which paints a very different picture than Matt Gaetz's own statement, which called this a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle. Is that what this was?
Perhaps. I think it's very clear to me, at least, that Matt Gaetz is acting in self-interest. I think the particulars of this ethics investigation would have come out, and he would have had to deal with them. He would have had, and the incoming administration would have had to deal with them. So I think it's a self-interested move. And I don't want us to get too far over our skis with regards to Republican senators here. I think Matt Gaetz is an easy case for them to exercise advise and consent in this regard. But I still think Donald Trump will be consistent in his effort to, in some ways, reel the DOJ in. He's worried about its independence. Donald Trump is, in so many ways, with these appointments, trying to consolidate his view of executive power. And so, just as Ken noted, we need to be concerned about who he's going to nominate in place of Gaetz. So I think 2 things. 1, Gaetz is acting in self-interest. 2, the Senate, let's not get over our skis in terms of them being a check and balance on Donald Trump. And 3, let's just realize we're in the chaos again. And here it is. It's just beginning.